The Egypt Air hijacking ends peacefully in Cyprus. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control updates its guidance on Zika virus transmission prevention and pregnancy planning. And a bittersweet farewell to the Obamas at their last White House Easter egg roll. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. A hijacking ordeal that began in Egypt Tuesday has ended peacefully in Cyprus. Cypriot authorities say the man who hijacked an Egyptian passenger jet and forced it to land on the small island of a nation has been arrested, and the hostage situation is now over. A Cyprus government spokesman says all passengers and crew are being released unharmed. The Egypt airplane was headed from Alexandria to Cairo before being diverted to Cyprus and landing at Larnaca Airport. Near the conclusion of the hijack drama, video footage showed one man climbing out the cockpit window and 3 more people dressed in uniforms running down the stairs. 81 people, including 15 crew, had been on board the Egypt Air flight when it took off from Alexandria, Egypt, en route to Cairo. Cyprus officials have identified the hijacker as Saif Eldin Mustafa. His motives for hijacking the plane remain unclear, but some reports say the man was making demands of his ex-wife, who lives in Cyprus. The Cypriot president also said the hijacking was not related to terrorism. The incident appears likely to further damage Egypt's vital tourism industry, which has already been suffering from years of political unrest and a burgeoning terror threat. Well, Pakistan's Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif is vowing to intensify counter-terrorism operations in the wake of Sunday's deadly suicide bombing in the city of Lahore. At least 72 people, including about 30 children, were killed and 300 others wounded in the blast at a crowded park. In a televised address to the nation, Sharif vowed to account for each and every drop of blood of our martyrs.
It has been made clear to all concerned departments that any patrols or facilitators of terrorists, wherever they may be or in whatever disguise they may be hiding, they will not be spared from the clutches of the law.
Well, a military spokesman says security agencies have concluded several operations based on initial leads and arrested a number of suspected terrorists and facilitators from areas in the provincial capital and 2 other cities of Punjab, the country's most populous province. White House spokesman John Ernst condemned the attack Monday as grotesque. Now, European government officials say the Brussels terror attacks highlight the need to more swiftly share information among governments and intelligence services. In California, 2 terrorism experts at the technology companies behind social media platforms should be more included in the effort. Now, viewers Michael Sullivan reports that the analysts who monitor hate groups say the threat of violent extremists has become global.
The Brussels attacks, with more than 30 dead and hundreds injured, show yet again the vulnerability of Europe, which is on the doorstep of extremist-held enclaves in North Africa and the Middle East.
Because there is territory that is controlled by groups like ISIS, or even Al-Qaeda in certain areas, where folks can basically study at universities for terror unimpeded.
But he worries also about the United States. There are fewer former jihadist fighters here, but there is a threat from social media sites that terrorists use for marketing and recruiting. Says another analyst, groups like Islamic State have
a real commitment to understanding what's the latest app, what's the latest way that young people like to communicate with each other, how can we throw off the authorities or lose them at critical moments.
On popular social media sites, threats by violent extremists blend with hateful rants by bigots, inspiring violence by so-called lone wolf terrorists such as the Boston Marathon bombers 3 years ago. Analysts say as governments work to improve coordination, technology companies can help.
I think at the end of the day, it's going to be the CEOs of Apple, Samsung, Facebook, Google, YouTube, and Twitter who could help come up with technological strategies that will protect privacy of the good guys and facilitate quick access to data that could be the difference between life and death in the battle against terrorists.
Apple and the U.S. government are at odds over privacy, as in a recent court clash over an iPhone of a suspect in the San Bernardino shootings in December. And attacks like the Brussels bombings are likely to keep the issue hot. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
Well, a Nigerian official says a girl suicide bomber arrested in Cameroon is not one of the 276 school girls abducted by Boko Haram from a school in the northeast Nigerian town of Chibok nearly 2 years ago. However, she is from a nearby community. The official says Cameroonian authorities gave the names of the girl and an older accomplice, but are holding them for questioning about how the Islamic extremists operate. The official is in Yaoundé, the Cameroonian capital, waiting for the girls to be handed over. Officials say the girl was arrested Friday with explosives strapped to her body. She appeared to be heavily dragged and suffering from injuries. Now, for more on the use of women in terrorist attacks in West Africa, reporter Abubakar Haruna Galadanchi joins us by phone from Kano in northern Nigeria. Hello, Harun.
Yeah, Mr. Vincent, I'm with you. Hello, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Now, tell us first, what makes officials believe that this girl cannot be one of the Chibok girls?
Actually, it was recalled that on Friday, 25th of this month, the girl was arrested in the Republic of Cameroon. And when the authorities arrested her with local vigilante group joint task force, and she was lamented that she was one of among the more than 200 schoolgirls that was kidnapped almost 2 years ago. And immediately when she said that, the Nigerian government community and movement for the make sure that these girls are released from the kidnapping of Boko Haram lamented that they didn't even know the girls. But as we are talking about it now, some of the parents of these more than 200 girls that was abducted from the school almost 2 years ago in Chibok, that was in Borno State here in Nigeria, about to leave Nigeria to Cameroon so that they will confirm is it true the girl is from the Chibok school or not. And the chairman of the parents association for this more than 200 girls, named as Yakubu Nkeki, stated that they will make sure when they arrive at Cameroon to testify that is it true this girl is from the abducted girls or not.
Abu Bakr, a very critical question here. Many girls have been involved in attacks in the recent past. Has there been any connection with the girls who have been abducted by Boko Haram? Abu Bakr, do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, so has there been any establishment that any girl from the Chibok group has been involved in the terrorist attacks?
Exactly. Since, as we are talking about now, almost 2 years ago, there are so many suicide attacks that was carried out here in northern Nigeria, and even some parts of the Niger Republic as well as Chad, and even the Cameroon. And some people, even some authorities, are claiming that some of these attacks carried out by women, they are most likely they are from those more than 200 girls that was abducted last year in Chibok.
And obviously forced to do so, we know. Their captives. Abu Bakr, thank you very much. Abu Bakr Haruna Galadanji reporting from Kano in northern Nigeria. Well, now 70% of the world's cocoa comes from West Africa, most of it from Ivory Coast. Child labor in cocoa plantations has been well documented and persists despite a 15-year-old agreement between the government and the world's top chocolate sellers to stop it. Emily Eob reports from Ivory Coast on efforts to stop the practice.
Cocoa plantations surround the village of Boniko. Keeping children off those fields is the goal of this campaign.
And in the field, will your child come work with you? No, in farm work we use machetes. He can injure himself. We should avoid it.
The event was organized by the International Cocoa Initiative, or ICI. Since 2007, it has been building schools and raising awareness about child labor in Ivory Coast.
There are many drivers of child labor: lack of information, awareness, poverty, and a lack of infrastructure in rural areas.
The ICI is financed by some of the world's top chocolate companies, including Nestle, which is facing a class action suit in the US for allegedly not disclosing on labels that their suppliers might rely on child labor. Ivory Coast cocoa production was slowed for a decade by conflict, which diverted attention from ending child labor. But now these efforts are getting back on track. Getting rid of child labor is profitable for farmers. It means their cocoa can be certified fair trade and sold at a higher price. This cooperative in Gagnoa is certified as fair trade.
The producers' living conditions have changed. They've built brick houses for themselves, roofs, small solar energy panels thanks to the premiums they receive.
The cooperative keeps an eye out for child workers.
At first, people would tell us, but when we were children, we worked in the fields. And we said yes, we all did it. But you saw how it limited us. Some of us got illnesses. Some of us didn't have any time to study. And now, people understand.
But it is not just local children. Kids are sometimes trafficked from neighboring countries. In June, Interpol rescued 48 children from Ivory Coast cocoa plantations. The operations was backed by the First Lady's office, which has launched poverty reduction initiative to help stop child labor.
Cocoa is our raw material. It's the backbone of our economy. We cannot risk having an embargo threaten our cocoa. So it's normal that besides the moral motivations that guide us, we can meet commercial motivations as well.
Yet an estimated 1.1 million children worked on cocoa plantations during the 2013-2014 harvest season. The government says it aims to reduce that number by 70% in the next 4 years. Emily Yob for VOA News in Abidjan.
Well, the United Nations says it is seeking to resettle more than 450,000 Syrian refugees by the end of 2018, but concedes that it is battling widespread fear and politicization of the issue. A ministerial-level conference will be held in Geneva, Switzerland on Wednesday with the participation of UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon and UN High Commissioner for Refugees Filippo Grandi to discuss the refugee crisis. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, the last migrants stranded at the border between Macedonia and Serbia accepted transfers to centers in Macedonia's north and south. The 237 migrants left their tents in a muddy field. About 1,200 migrants have been stranded in Macedonia since Balkan countries closed their borders to refugees heading further north into Europe. Now, diplomatic sources say the European Union plans to cut back its funding for Burundi's lucrative peacekeeping contingent in Somalia to try to force President Pierre Nkurunziza into talks with opponents and away from the brink of ethnic conflict. Nkurunziza's government has brushed off other cuts in aid from Western donors, seeking a way to pressure the government to stop a year-long political crisis from exploding into a new war in Africa's volatile Great Lakes region. Bujumburu's 5,400-strong contingent in Somalia's AMISOM force earns the state roughly $13 million a year and its soldiers a combined $52 million. Now, cutting all funding would leave the African Union, which oversees AMISOM's 22,000-member force, having to find another donor to pay Burundi's troops. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, new guidelines for pregnancy in the age of the Zika virus. Stay with us.
Come from and how many people around the world are affected. I am Dr. Ruiz. The Zika virus is an emerging mosquito-borne virus, and the World Health Organization has declared the Zika epidemic a global emergency. Over 20 countries have reported the disease, and there is no cure. Among Among the symptoms are fever, rash, and redness of the eyes. Anyone with symptoms should get plenty of rest, drink fluids, and treat symptoms with over-the-counter medicines. Learn the facts about Zika. Education is your first line of defense.
Well, it's time now for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with an update on the Zika virus. Lino.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has issued new guidelines recommending how long men and women exposed to the Zika virus should wait before trying to conceive babies. The new guidelines say women diagnosed with Zika should wait at least 8 weeks after symptoms began before trying to conceive, while men should hold off for at least 6 months. Health officials note the recommendations are based on limited data about Zika's persistence in blood and semen. Zika has not been proven to cause microcephaly in babies, but there is growing evidence that suggests a link. The condition is defined by unusually small heads in babies that can result in developmental problems. Botswana has moved ahead of other countries, both Western nations and the economically disadvantaged, in tackling the AIDS epidemic. The United Nations Program on HIV/AIDS has called on countries to strive to ensure that 90% of their citizens know their HIV status and that 90% are treated with antiretroviral therapy to achieve 90% viral suppression. A new report published in The Lancet has found that Botswana is exceeding these goals well ahead of a 2020 deadline. The country has reached a viral suppression rate of 96% among its infected citizens, mostly between the ages of 15 to 49. Up to 25% of the adult population in Botswana is infected with HIV. Now, the World Health Organization is urging China to strengthen vaccine regulation after an illegal black market drug ring was busted earlier this month. Police have arrested more than 130 suspects over a scandal in which $48 million of illegal vaccines was sold onto the market. The vaccines, some targeting meningitis and rabies, are suspected of having been sold in dozens of places around China since 2011. The WHO initially made the comments in an emailed statement by WHO China representative Bernard Schwartlander on Monday. At a news conference Tuesday in Beijing, the team leader for the expanded program on immunization reassured parents that the vaccines involved in the case were not, in fact, toxic or dangerous.
Vaccines that are improperly handled can lose their potency, and they may not protect the child against the disease the vaccine was intended to prevent. But improperly stored and improperly handled vaccines do not acquire new toxicity and become in and of themselves dangerous. Rather, they just may not work, which is a serious problem, but it's a different problem than being toxic or dangerous, which they are not.
I felt very scared and worried about my child after I heard this news. Every parent pays special attention to vaccine. Some reports say there have been some adverse effects after children had the vaccines. I would be very concerned and afraid if the expired vaccines are found in the market.
And the WHO says that Chinese vaccine production itself is safe, and its distribution of vaccines through the government's expanded program on immunization. But regulatory loopholes remain to be tackled in the private sector. Well, prescription narcotic painkillers in the U.S. will now come with warning labels about the risks of misuse, including abuse, addiction, overdose, and death. Recently, the Centers for Disease Control called addiction to opioid painkillers an epidemic. VOA's Carol Pearson reports the health agency has asked doctors and patients to rethink the use of these drugs and to review alternative ways of relieving pain.
The Centers for Disease Control says U.S. prescription narcotic drug use has become a major public health crisis. The CDC says more people than ever are overdosing on prescription pain relievers, and it's fueling an epidemic of heroin addiction when patients can no longer get prescription opioids. The agency is urging doctors and patients to explore alternative ways to reduce pain. Researchers at the Group Health Research Institute in Seattle, Washington, explored the power of the mind.
One of the most important new understandings of chronic pain and chronic low back pain is that the mind plays a very important part.
The researchers studied 2 mind-body therapies. One was cognitive behavioral therapy.
Cognitive behavioral therapy focuses on helping people learn how to change how they think their pain and helps promote concrete activities that people can do to better manage it.
The other therapy is mindfulness, which draws from meditation and yoga.
Mindfulness tries to help people change their awareness, increase their awareness with their pain, and to become more accepting of the pain, and then to focus their energies on finding ways to constructively manage it.
We teach things such as how to manage the emotional impact of pain, how to manage the activity impact of pain, how to manage the things that sometimes are not addressed in primary care or unusual care for chronic pain. So by doing that, we look at a more holistic level of approach.
More than 300 volunteers, all with back pain, participated in the study.
Benefits in decreased pain and improved function lasted for a full year, which is not common amongst most treatments for chronic pain.
Cherkin said both mindfulness and cognitive behavioral therapy could help patients who suffer from other types of chronic pain. The study was published in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. Carol Pearson, VOA News, Washington.
That's our Africa Health Report for today, Vincent.
Well, thanks a lot, Lenore, and be sure to watch the Mudu's Health Reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, the leaders of the Six-Nation East African Community are considering a proposal to ban the import of used vehicles, clothes and shoes to promote local industry. It would be a major change. Now, Kenya imports more than 100,000 metric tons of second-hand clothes for sale on the street each year. Lenny Ruvaga reports from Nairobi on the advantages and disadvantages of an import ban.
Suleiman Kamau has been selling second-hand clothes for 12 years at the toy market here in Kibera. He's worried about the proposed regional ban on second-hand clothes.
It's a bad blow because I'm educated. I went to school. I'm cool. I have a diploma, but I'm not employed. There's no employment. So this was my source of income instead of engaging in other illegal activities. So it's the best.
Not only do sellers like Kamau depend on this trade for their living, but Kenyans also depend on it for affordable clothes. The goal of the ban would be to encourage local Kenyan industry. Economists agree that Africa needs to produce more finished products. The recent economic downturn in China has only highlighted the limits and risks of commodities-based growth. Industry leaders in Kenya support the ban.
If we have an opportunity where we're able to sell these goods in our local market, it then leads to the growth of that industry. And the second-hand traders, in my view, would also be able to sell these clothes in the local market because it's not limited to who can trade in manufactured clothes. So they would replace the product and sell it with locally manufactured goods.
Alpha Knits has been producing garments outside Nairobi for about 40 years. The business employs 600 people. Today, Director Hiran Bedi checks fabric quality. He says it will take more than an import ban for him to compete with mitumba, the Swahili word for used clothes.
If the power cost doesn't go down, then the cost will remain high, and then we cannot compete against the mitumba. So there are certain factors which need to be addressed by government to help us get reasonable pricing for the people who are going to stop buying mitumba.
An Alpha Knit sweater currently retails for about $5. That's about double what it costs to buy one second-hand. Lenny Ruvaga for VOA News, Nairobi.
It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. The White House tradition rolls on. We'll be right back. machines.
最長として深く尊敬されている指導者であるムガベ。
Nothing he said or did in the course of that trip was meant to offend or express hostility towards the Kingdom of Morocco, which is a valued member of the United Nations.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. U.S. President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama welcomed thousands of children to the South Lawn of the White House Monday morning for the annual Easter egg roll. It is their last year hosting the event. This year, the First Lady added a fun run to the mix. More than 35,000 people received tickets that allow them to walk on the South Lawn of the White House, rain or shine. Fortunately, the sun broke through mid-morning after a night of scattered rain showers. Now, the theme of this year's event was Let's Celebrate. Well, next up, an all-American dish with a local twist trends in an unexpected place. Fried chicken and beer is on the menu in South Korea. More than 4,000 Chinese visitors to South Korea made it their priority to sit down to a fried chicken dinner. The combination of South Korean chicken and beer became popular in China with the Korean TV show My Love from the Star, a romantic comedy that aired in 2013 and 2014. The group began arriving from Saturday on 158 flights for a 7-day tour. More than 750 tables were set up for the meal, and as with any feast, there was plenty of beer to wash down the crispy fried chicken. Well, and that's our show for today. And be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com for more news. Tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords. In the United States, federal laws are made by the Congress. Listen to this story about two bills.
Even if the immigration bill passes in the Senate, lawmakers in the House of Representatives are considering their own reforms. Agriculture also is a focus this week, as the Senate prepares to vote on the Farm Bill. The House is expected to take up the package later this month.
The House of Representatives is made up of 435 elected members. The number of representatives each state has depends on the number of people in the state.
Often, this group of lawmakers is called simply the House. Now, when you hear the term House of Representatives, you'll know what these newswords mean.